It all started in the 12th century, in August 1173 to be precise, when the foundations of what would become the Leaning Tower of Pisa were laid. By the time construction reached the second floor in 1178, the tower had already begun to lean. The foundations beneath it were only 3 meters deep and set in weak, unstable soil. Construction was halted for 1 century, which gave the soil time to settle, or so they thought. But as construction continued, to compensate for the tilt, the upper floors were built with one side taller than the other. By 1990, the tower's lean had reached 5.5 degrees. The structure was finally stabilized between 1993 and 2001, and the tilt reduced to 3.97 degrees. But what does all this have to do with me? Well, if it hadn't begun to tilt, then no one would have ever told a story about it. It would have been one tower among many, and its mystery and charm and intangible tentacles would never have floated across the French skies and English Channel, and reached into my impressionable young mind as I went about my life in the UK. It wouldn't have become a landmark in my imagination of what lay beyond the shores of the piece of land I was born on, and I wouldn't have dreamed of one day setting sail and going in search of it. And ultimately, I wouldn't have found myself on a freezing December morning, huddled and shivering under a plastic poncho in its shadow, on the start line of the Pisa Marathon. Strangely, if there's one thing that really motivates me, it's getting a medal after a run, and I wanted a medal with the Leaning Tower on it. The tower had become a part of my mental landscape, and as such, a part of my history. An old friend, and something I knew I could count on as a carrot to lead me back to the finish line. It would be waiting at the end for me, not with a camera in hand to record the moment as I crossed the finish line, but as a silent, steady presence to guide me. Stable ground I knew I could count on to bring me home. My training in the lead up to the race had been beset by struggles, my body just not wanting to cooperate with the goals I'd set. The route is flat with lots of long straight stretches, and I had hoped to do my fastest time. But as the weeks went by, I began to feel I'd be lucky if I could beat Oprah Winfrey's time of 4 hours 29. For some reason, she's become a sort of marathon benchmark, so I decided a few weeks out to let go of time expectations and just enjoy the race. It would be a trip to the sea and back with people to feed and water me along the way. Back on the starting line, I took my last long deep breaths as the countdown began, like a deep diver about to take a plunge into the deep unknown. Because that's what a marathon is, a deep dive into the unknown. Your training might have gone to plan, and you might have hit your goal times, but you just don't know what will happen on the day, in your body or in your mind. Will your energy hold out? Will your gut behave? Will you hit the wall? How will your mind react when the tiredness kicks in? You know there'll be some kind of battle to face along the way, and how you handle it will shape the outcome. It's a journey into the unknown, and that's what keeps us coming back time and again. Even though 5 minutes after you finish a race you swear you'll never do another one, a week later, there you are, searching for your next one. It's the adventure and the conquest that makes it all worthwhile. The gun goes and we're off. The first kilometre down to the river is absolutely freezing, and the sky is grey. As we reach the river, it's totally foggy, and you can barely make out the buildings on the other side. I'm weaving in and out of people, trying to get into a groove with those running at my pace, and trying not to go too fast at the same time. I immediately notice one particular woman who's dressed for summer. She has a short running skirt on, as do I, but she's paired it with a cross-back tank top that leaves most of her back exposed to the freezing air, and she has no gloves on. I feel grateful for my long-sleeve top. We're running at more or less the same pace and keep passing each other. I wonder if she's dressed that way as she knows the sun will come out later and it'll get really hot, or whether she's doing the half marathon and figures she won't be out for so long. The next time I come level with her, I see she has the half marathon bib on, and then after that I don't see her again. We run to the outskirts of the city and quickly find ourselves running through some small towns towards the coast. I've set a steady pace for myself where I'm moving at a good speed and can breathe well, so I decide to lock that in and just cruise. As we're coming to the edge of the last town, I become aware of some heavy footsteps behind me. They're coming at a regular pace, but each one lands with a thud, and it becomes the soundtrack to my run. Eventually, a large, tall man in a green shirt levels with me and then goes by, the sound of his feet consuming all my attention. I would see him again later on towards the end of the race, on the last roundabout approaching the city. This time it would be me who would glide by, leaving him behind. Just after kilometre 12, the half-marathon route branches off, sending the halfers back to the city. I watch as a long line of them climb the embankment and turn back. I instead carry on to the coast, passing a long trail of discarded gloves that now litter the landscape. It's warmed up, so I take off my own, but tuck them carefully into my waistband so I don't lose them. All of a sudden, I feel a wave of happiness come over me. I'm in cruise control, I feel good, we've left the fog in the city behind, and a glorious landscape has opened up before me. There's a line of trees ahead, a golden field to my left, and another to my right, full of strange black things. I eventually figure out they must be dried sunflower heads left to wilt. but they look more like charred showerheads for the bugs below. I pass some runners, and others pass me as we make our way towards the forest that will lead us to the coast. I start to fixate on another runner who passes me. He's got a real bounce to his step, but it's his hair that grabs my attention, as it's long on the top and bobs up and down as he goes. He's short and stocky, and although I can't see his face, I form a really clear image of what I think it looks like, which I can still see today. A man wearing long blue leggings levels with me and starts to pass. He's making quite the effort to do so, though, and I wish he would just trot on by so that my mind can free itself of his presence. When we get to the water station a short distance away, I take 2 cups and slow down to drink them, and in the time it takes me to do that, he gets away. I'm relieved, but he's still in view, and a part of my mind teases me, saying, "Go on, just catch him. You can do it." But I know that if I make any attempt to do so, I'll be taking myself outside of my comfort zone and will pay for it. So I keep him in my sights, and eventually he outpaces me on the coastal stretch, and I don't see him again. The road swings to the left, and we've come to the forest. The trees form an arch over the road, and it's all dark inside. I'm glad to say goodbye to the sun, as I can sense a temperature drop coming on. But when it does come, it's accompanied by a sense of magic. The sunlight filters through the branches, creating multiple shafts of light. It's all quiet apart from the footsteps of my fellow travellers. I feel like I've just entered the realm of a fairy tale, or an enchanted land. I imagine a large deer stepping out from the trees and passing me snippets of wisdom. "You've got this, Rebecca. Remember what we talked about. All you've learned along the way. You can do this. Just hold strong." And then he slowly steps back into the undergrowth, and I out of the forest onto the straight stretch towards the coast. A couple of policewomen are stationed at the intersection, directing traffic away from our route. I turn left onto the long 3-kilometre stretch parallel to the sea and away from Pisa. The sun is directly ahead, and I can barely see anything apart from a large shiny wall of reflection from the damp road. I keep my head down and plod on. On the other side of the road are runners coming back in the other direction. I can see how many are ahead of me, and as I run I pass the various groups of pacers and wonder how far ahead of me the 4-hour pacers are, and if I'll have a hope of catching them at all. But thoughts like that are stressful, so I let it go. When I do eventually pass them, it's not so far from the turnaround point, but at this point we're 23 kilometres in, and any extra exertion on my part could end in disaster. But I'm well ahead of the 4:15 group, so I'll take that for a win and run with it. I now have a 7-kilometre straight stretch of road to go until we come to the mouth of the Arno River and head back to Pisa. So to keep my mind happy, I try and take in the scenery and watch the other runners who are now behind me and thinning out the further I go on. The majority of the runners in this race are all running faster than 4 hours, which is quite interesting to note, but I don't get hung up on it. It is what it is. I am where I am. For quite a while on this coastal stretch, I can see the balloons of the 4-hour pacers ahead of me. But around kilometre 25, I start to feel tired and have to focus on holding my pace, shortly after I realise I can't see them anymore. Until Marina di Pisa, that is, where I see a balloon and think I must have somehow miraculously caught up with them. But no, it's a pacer who couldn't hold the pace and has to keep stopping to bend over to recover himself. I feel for him, but glide on by, each of us in our own private suffering. As I run through the small town, I get a waft of greasy kitchen smells. It turns my stomach, and I think back to the poor pacer doubled over a short way back. Turning my mind to happier things, I have the sea right beside me on the left. It has turned out to be the most glorious day, and the water is flat, calm, and several stripes of blue merging into each other, getting darker towards the horizon. Ahead I can see the mountains laid out before me, snow-capped and glistening in the sun. This is exactly as I pictured this marathon, and I feel like I've been gifted the perfect weather conditions and a temperature cold enough to be comfortable running. I'm now coming up to the mouth of the river, and it's time to get serious. There are 10 kilometres left, and most of it is a straight road. I can really feel my energy levels have dropped, so I'm going to have to come up with a strategy to keep myself on track. I decide to count. Nothing too taxing for my brain, but it will help to keep my legs in gear. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. I'm passing people on this stretch, which makes me feel good, but as I come level with one man, I can feel pushback from him. He does not want me to get past. He's going to fight. He's going to hold on to his pace, and I am not going to get past him. Or so he thinks. But I simply don't have the mental energy to get involved in that battle. I've always noticed when I'm exercising that when I get tired, my thoughts can easily turn negative, and if I'm not quick to catch them, it's not a fun place to be. So a battle of trying to get past someone, or the uncomfortable feeling of running at the same pace but not having any interaction, is a game I don't want to play. I want my mind to be free to wander and glide, so I dig deep and pump a little more energy into my steps to pass him. I don't see him again. As I clock up the kilometres, I set my sights on the brightly coloured shirts ahead of me. I set them as my anchor point, and when I pass them, I move on to the next. Up ahead, I can see 1 green and 2 yellow shirts, so I fix on them. Slowly, I get closer, until I'm upon them, and it's Mr. Green Shirt Heavyfoot from the beginning. I smile to myself and move on. Next up is a couple running together. He's wearing grey and she's wearing a dusty pink top. They're holding a relaxed conversation in French. There is no way I could hold a conversation with anyone right now, so I'm impressed. I try to pass them, but I can't, so I settle in behind. We're just coming up to 40 kilometers, and I think to myself, if they can talk, they must have so much energy left they could literally bolt off. And sure enough, a few strides later, they pick up the pace and disappear. I don't see them again. And now it's me in the tower. I can see it on the other side of the river waiting for me. But I'm so tired. I am so darn tired that when I get to the water station, it takes me all my effort to grab a cup of water. I don't even have the energy to ask for the mineral salts, which I really need. So I plod on, under the underpass and up the slope on the other side. I come to the bridge and trip, but I catch myself and throw a mental hook out to the tower so I can wind myself in. Not long to go now. Just got to hang in there. But the emotions are rising and I can't contain myself. I burst into tears on the third last street because I can't believe I'm nearly there. After all the difficulties I had during training and all the fear I wouldn't make it, or that it would take all day, or that I'd have to walk, I'm nearly there. My body didn't give up on me, and I've shown myself that no matter how hard something seems, no matter how much self-doubt you encounter along the way, if you just keep putting one step in front of the other and just keep progressing towards your goal, no matter how slowly, you will eventually get there. I'm on the final stretch now. I wipe my eyes, pull myself together and round the final corner with a nod to my tower and a glorious leap across the finish line. 4 hours, 5 minutes. I'll take it.